guys, Pockets here. Welcome to the Brackenspore Feral DPS boss guide. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the talents I chose to use for this fight. So I'm using Displacer Beast to allow me to blink through the waves. This is simply because there's not really any other movement that needs to be done in this fight. Wild Charge is not going to help you much because the only targets you're really interested in DPSing as Feral are the Flesh Eaters and the boss. The other adds could be taken care of by the other melee. And the Flesh Eaters should generally be next to the boss at all times, so you're not really going to need to be traveling between targets. Fiendline Swiftless is just a no-no here pretty much, when you can instead have Displacer Beast. So, in the 60 tier, I'm using Incarnation because, well, it's Incarnation, it's really awesome, and pretty much good at everything. So, that's the 60 tier. In the 100 tier, I'm using Blood Talons. You could also use Lunar Inspiration if that's something you really prefer. It's not that bad on this fight. I personally just don't think it's superior. I did some pulls with it on Heroic. I haven't done any on Mythic, but when I did it on Heroic, I really felt that Blood Talons does perform a little better. So feel free to try out what you think you might perform better. Try out both of them on this fight, see how they go for you. Maybe you're a little better at one than the other, and that could definitely make the difference for you. So not going to say you can't play Lunar Inspiration, but I went with Blood Talons. So another important thing to mention is I'm actually using the PvP 2-set bonus on this fight. I mean, the Conquest pieces, of course. The Honored ones are not high enough item level to really justify using it. And the PvP 2 piece, if you haven't heard what it is before, for Feral, is when you successfully interrupt a spell with Skull Bash, the cooldown on your Tiger's Fury is reset. And if you've never heard this before, at this point you're probably going, what the fuck? That's crazy! And it is kind of crazy. It is mitigated by the fact that if you're doing this fight on Mythic, you probably already have Mythic pieces in the glove slot, and there's a good chance in the helm slot. Those are the pieces I chose. Of course, you can use any two other pieces of the set that whatever fits best. But for me, I've got 685s in the slots that I actually have the two-piece for, so I lose a lot of benefit in that regard. But I still think it's worth using, at least until we can get like Blackrock Founder gear, or maybe something even better than that. So essentially what this is going to mean throughout the fight is that I'm going to be getting my Tiger's Fury about every 18 seconds while the ad is up, if I can get every other interrupt. And I'm assigned to be the only person interrupting every odd interrupt, so I can get this benefit as much as possible. We have our warriors on every even interrupt, so they can get root interruption. If you can convince your raid to do this, awesome. If not, then, well, tough luck. It's probably not worth using if you can't get the kick every single time, or close to every single time. And there was a couple kicks I missed in this fight, and you'll see that. But the thing with the two pieces, if you're going to be the sole interrupter, you need to be able to do this very reliably. And because the cast is pretty fast, it can be difficult to do this reliably 100% of the pulls, especially when you're pressing on it, because you're bound to make a mistake eventually. So what I did is I made a WeakAura setup and a macro setup so that I can do this as well as possible every single pull. So I'll have the information for that WeakAura, the import string for the WeakAuras, and the macro in the description below if you want to check that out. So without further ado, let's get this started. So typical opener on this fight, since it's a single target at the start, I'm running with my stealth and pot, hit Rake, hit Incarnation, shred to 5 combo points. At 5 combos, I blow my Berserk and Tiger's Fury, and then I'm basically going into the normal rotation. There's not much more to say than that. So to talk about cooldown usage a little bit, obviously I'm using all my cooldowns at the start because it stacks up with your procs, and you're going to want that to take most advantage of those procs. My lucky double-sided coin, which if you don't have, you might want to get one. It's pretty good. My lucky double-sided coin, since it's a 2-minute cooldown, and the ads come out just about every 2 minutes. I think it's a little bit less often than that, but pretty close to every 2 minutes. What's going to happen is my lucky double-sided coin is going to come off right when the first ad dies. So I actually choose to delay that after that, so that I don't use it immediately when it comes off cooldown the first time, and I delay it for when my 3 minutes come up on the second ad, so that way I can have my lucky double-sided coin off cooldown for every ad for the rest of the fight. Now, you might lose out on a usage this way. You might only end up getting one less coin than you would otherwise if you had just used it on cooldown. But the fact that you're using it when there's 2 targets up, I would say outweigh this, and especially progression, where damage on the fungal Flesh Eater very much does matter. is probably the most important thing in this fight as a melee DPS, this is definitely what I would recommend. So as you can see here, getting a lot of advantage out of that 2-piece PvP bonus. Every time he casts that I'm assigned to it and my Skull Bash is off cooldown, I can kick it and get a cooldown reset. This next cast coming up here, you'll see it, and kicked, and I get my cooldown refresh. Like I said, you're going to try to get as many kicks as possible, and that includes getting the first one. If you're assigned to every odd interrupt like I am, you're going to want to run out and kick the first cast. Or you might be able to just jump spin and kick the first cast if it's close enough, since the interrupt will happen instantly thanks to Skull Bash interrupting instantly when you press the key, even if you're not in melee range. So, like I said, Displacer Beast is really great on this fight for being able to blink through the waves. I believe I don't actually use Displacer Beast. I use it once in this fight, but I don't actually use it to blink through the waves, so I'm not going to be able to show that. But essentially how it goes for that is the wave's hitbox is essentially the base of the wave. If your face comes in contact with the base of the wave, it will kill you. If the top of the wave passes over you, like you're just being engulfed by the wave, at that point it has not been close enough to kill you. So that's important to understand if you're going to blink through it. Because what's going to happen is if you blink before the wave is even close to you at all, you can blink into the tail end of the base of the wave and die, which is definitely not what you want to happen. So you're going to want to wait until the front end of the wave is pretty much right on you, and then blink, and then you'll clear it no problem. And also, obviously, you don't want to blink like parallel to the wave because that'll kill you. You want to try to blink straight through it. So as far as what you want to do to handle your bleed management on these two ads, if you watch the Twin Ogron boss video, it's going to be very much the same story. I'm going to be trying to keep my shred to a relative minimum when there's two mobs up, because I really want to make sure my rake uptime is perfect on both mobs as much as possible. I am trying to keep up Thrash where appropriate here. It is a DPS gain to do so. It's not a big DPS gain, and you shouldn't obsess about having it up 100% of the time, especially if you're really struggling and things start falling off. You should focus on that, especially with the rake and etc. If your rips are not up, it's fine to Thrash there, especially if you get an Omen proc. Anytime you can refresh Thrash with an Omen proc, and it's in its pandemic range, of course, you can do that, and it's going to be a nice damage boost. But don't obsess about it too much. You can see I don't really have Thrash up 100% of the time that the ads are up, just because it's not feasible to do that and keep both my bleeds up the entire time. But the 2-piece PvP set bonus does help me keep up my rip and rake quite a lot. If you don't have the 2-piece for this fight, which is fine, it's not going to put you at a huge disadvantage. It will put you at a little disadvantage, in my opinion, from what I've seen trying it with and without the 2-piece. Your rip uptimes probably are going to be a little lower if you don't have the 2-piece. So another thing to mention about the Displacer Beast and the waves is something that you can do as a melee that pretty much no other spec can do, is you can blink after you charge into the wave with a Skull Bash and get interrupts that nobody else can, except for maybe like a maid or a shaman with their ranged interrupt. So something that could be really helpful on progression is if you see the Flesh Eaters in a wave and their cast that you're supposed to interrupt is coming up, or maybe you're not assigned to interrupts at all, and you see this situation, you can get behind the ad relative to the wave, Skull Bash into it. The kick will happen instantly when you press the Skull Bash, and then while the Skull Bash is charging you to the mob, you can hit your Displacer Beast key, and it'll blink you through the wave. Now, obviously, this is pretty dangerous, and you should be careful when you do this. If the alignment doesn't look quite right, you might want to not risk it. But you can definitely prevent wipes doing this, so it is something to keep in mind, because if you're in a situation like that, there's a pretty good chance that nobody else is going to get the interrupt if your ranged DPS aren't watching out for it. So that's something that you can watch out for. So to go back to cooldown usage a little bit, like I said, I have my coin up for every ad. The second ad, I had held my 3-minute cooldowns actually came off, and I held my coin a little bit to go with those 3-minute cooldowns so I can go really heavy on the ad. I actually used my potion there, but I wouldn't recommend that. I just still wasn't sure how the cooldown timing was going to work out for the rest of the fight, so that's why I used my potion there while everything was stacked up. So here, I wasn't able to get my incarnation off while that third ad was up. That's just how it's going to be, really. You shouldn't really try to push it, in my opinion, because you could get another incarnation in if you use it immediately there, and then use it pretty quickly when it comes off cooldown before the end of the fight if you're really pushing Berserk. But most likely, even if you're progressing on this fight, especially if you've got a lot of gear, more than people had when they originally killed this, you're not going to get that. The fight's not going to last long enough to get that 4th incarnation, and so I wouldn't worry about it. So here I'm holding my incarnation and my Berserk for the 4th ad, I believe it is. And here we're actually burning the boss. Instead of killing this ad, I just chose to go and blow my cooldowns and bleed up the ad to pad because I felt like it. Obviously don't do this on a kill, that would be pretty dumb. But I'm waiting here for my coin to come off cooldown so I can blow my cooldowns and burst really hard. Same thing for the rest of the fight. Basically, I'm trying to keep my bleeds up on both both the boss and the ad. If you're progressing on this, you're probably going to have to kill this ad, almost definitely. And you might even have to kill the ad after this one, just depending. Actually, no, you won't actually have to kill this ad. I take that back. But you will have to kill this ad if you're progressing on it, most likely. So just be aware of how your damage balance is, and plan accordingly, of course. So somewhere around this point, I forgot to mention, but this actually is not a kill. We ended up wiping because somebody missed a decay cast. I get this kick here, and then somewhere around this point, I say in Ventrilo, we're fine, just don't miss an interrupt. And then nobody interrupted this next cast, and we all died, which is really unfortunate because if you look at the damage meter, I was wrecking it, and I would have had the #1 parse for non-flamethrower feral druids, because apparently people do flamethrower as feral druid, which is ridiculous. Make your balance druids or something do that. But anyways, that's the Brackenspore feral DPS boss guide. Like I said, the WeakAuras for the interrupt bar and the macro for the interrupting macro I use are going to be in the description, as well as usual, the parse for this wipe, and also there's a poll after this wipe where we actually killed it, and you can look at that one too if that really matters to you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, yada yada. If you found this video helpful, maybe check out my Twitch too, that would be awesome. But that's all I got for this fight. Until next time, guys, see you later.